On this episode of Queer Sports, elite athletes are speaking out about mental health, but are they getting the support they need to compete? Olympians Raven Saunders, Anastasia Bousis, Matthew Mitchum, and journalist Julie Kliegman weigh in. We look at how sports psychology is changing the youth tennis game. And former NFL player Ryan O'Callaghan opens up about coming out. Welcome to Queer Sports. I'm Ariel Demross. We're talking about the mental health of athletes. Competing professionally requires nonstop training, focused discipline, and performing under pressure. Recently, athletes like Simone Biles, Naomi Osaka, and Kevin Love have been publicly sharing their mental health struggles in order to destigmatize mental health care and shine a light on the pressures that elite athletes face. Anastasia, why should we be talking about the mental health of athletes?
Because all we focus on is our physical bodies and our performance. And I think the mind-physical bond, to me, that was really one of the biggest missing links in my career. And I don't have regrets of my career, but certainly if I could have done something over, maybe that's the definition of a regret, I don't know. But
I think it is.
I absolutely wish that there was more focus on my mental health, and not just from a sports psych perspective, but from just a holistic, how you're living your life, how fulfilled you are, like a holistic lens.
What do you mean by sports psych perspective versus a more holistic approach?
As sports psych, we'll say, how can you jump higher? How can you compete faster? How can you win the race? Compartmentalize what your mind gym is. And to me, really one of the missing links was just having a therapist for my daily life, struggling to come out of the closet, feeling alone, having significant anxiety, attaching all my self-worth to results. I really think that your personal life completely dictates a lot of the results that you find in your professional life.
Yeah, sports psych is very much about performance and how to get the optimal performance out of you. And, it might focus on things like, adrenaline and cortisol response and how to handle those and how to reframe your mind so that you don't freak out about the butterflies in your stomach or whatever. But it is very much about optimal performance within the sports context and not about how to be a happier, healthier, wholer person.
Has that been your experience as well? Is it, when you're talking to a therapist, is somebody who's just focusing on making you a better athlete?
If it's sports related or sports psych, like she said, typically, yeah, that is going to be the case.
Julie, you're writing a book about some of this stuff. So
Yes.
When it comes to athletes and their mental health, are we talking about it enough?
No, definitely not. More and more, thanks to athletes like we have right here. But there is a focus on the mental performance side of things, like Anastasia was referencing. It's all about how you can perform better. It's certainly related to mental health. I think they're two sides of the same coin. But we need to be talking more about mental health, depression, anxiety, bipolar disorder, eating disorders, substance use, all of these things that affect athletes as people and not just on stage when they're competing.
And when we talk about needing to talk about it more, is it giving athletes more access to resources, or is it actually allowing athletes to talk about how hard some of this is? What exactly do we need more of?
I think it's both, right? I think that's such a great question because a lot of times we hear a lot of talk about awareness, and I think that's great and so necessary, especially because athletes are role models for people.
Yeah.
But it's also about stepping up and providing the resources if you're a team or a league or an organization.
I think if you are happy and healthy in your private life, that helps shift your definition of success. And usually when you let go of your need for success, that's when you achieve it. So, when I was struggling significantly, unfortunately, thinking about taking my own life, it didn't matter how fast I skated. And I didn't skate all that fast when that was going on because what are you going to prioritize, right? You really put all of your self-worth into your results. And once that's the case, once you feel like it's do or die, you have no fun and you do not perform to your best.
I know that for me, it's certainly came from a place of sort of low self-esteem. And it's like, if I do something really good, or if I am the best in the world, then I'm going to get that external validation. So I think some of the biggest problems probably have to do with, perfectionism, with body image, and basically everything that you would see out in the real world. Athletes are no different to the general population. It's just that we do things at a very extreme way. And so in that case, I guess it probably manifests in some pretty extreme ways.
Raven, do you have some thoughts on this?
Same, to your point, like, especially for us as athletes, we're just seen in such a great light. When people watch us, especially when we're competing on the highest stage, we're seen as almost like superheroes. And then sometimes we establish ourselves as well as superheroes, with me and the Hulk.
The Hulk over here, right? Sure. Yeah.
So, and then when you look at that, you look internally and then you look externally at how people see you, you realize that you do need to identify and address, like she said, on both ends. You need to have the awareness to be able to have those conversations, but also the resources to be able to deal with it once it comes. But a lot of these challenges we never really knew, or some of us couldn't put a finger on it until a lot of these conversations were being had.
Yeah, that's exactly right. It does take awareness and resources, but sports will never invest resources into something that they aren't aware of.
Right.
And so the awareness comes first, and it takes athletes like Simone Biles and Kevin Love and and us to talk about these things, so that sports can realize that there is a problem, and that's when they can then invest the resources in to actually address the problem.
Right.
It seems to me like a no-brainer that somebody who experiences a lot of pressure, athletes would need access to mental health resources.
Yeah, but like Raven was saying, we're already perceived as, superheroes, like we do these amazing things. Nobody knows what's going on inside our heads until we actually communicate it. And so nobody knows that we are not that resilient, or we don't know how to handle this, or that we have really bad self-image and that we are using all of these external things to make ourselves feel it. And nobody knows that until we actually talk about it.
And then also, like, to that point as well, with no one knowing, when you're at that level as well, you don't want to let your competitors know that you're not in a good space.
Right.
That if it's 2 weeks before a competition that, hey, world, I'm not doing too well, could you like, mentally as an athlete, your competitive edge kicks in, and sometimes that also limits your ability to open up about the things that you're actually going through in certain periods.
I think it also has to do with the media, right? My industry, because a lot of times athletes may be ready to come forward, but they might not necessarily trust the media and how we're going to handle those stories in a sensitive manner. I mean, it's a little different now where you can post on your Instagram or work with an outlet like the Players Tribune or something like that to tell your story in your own voice. But traditionally, journalism has not been super open to treating these stories in a respectful manner.
It's hard, though, because there's still so much shame associated, I think, with mental health struggles.
Yeah.
Like, I knew I had resources, or I was privileged and I could have gone and got a therapist and paid out of pocket, but I didn't even want to admit it to myself, because as an athlete, it's like when you're going through shit, you just keep going.
Okay, so I was gonna ask you this later on, but I'm just gonna ask it now. So I am proudly in therapy, have been for years, think it's super important. Everybody, great, perfect.
Actually, yeah. I'm a double-handed too.
Okay. Should more athletes be actually raising their hand and saying, yes, I'm in therapy, and it's not just sports psychology, like legit, I am, trying to get a handle on my life?
The culture is definitely changing, 100%. Like I said, from 2016's team to this past 2020 team, with the amount of conversations that we had as a team about it, or talking to people individually that were open about, hey, I'm going to therapy, or even me going out and being an advocate, like, hey, after this, make sure you see somebody, because no one talks about, like, that depression era that comes right after you get done competing at an Olympics. So
yeah, there's a name for it, right? Isn't it called like the Olympic
come down.
Blues, yeah.
Oh,
That's a cultural thing. Sorry.
Okay, yeah, sorry.
Canada, it's post-games blues.
Yeah, sure. Olympic come down. Yeah, okay. So
Oh,
yeah,
gosh.
language barrier, but yeah.
All right, so that is a thing.
Oh, it's the biggest thing that goes, like, so untalked about across all Olympic sports that I didn't know, and you feel so alone, but you have to remember there's like 1,000 other athletes that are going through the exact same thing, but no one has ever opened up that conversation.
On the flip side of things, I would assume that for a lot of athletes, actually practicing your sport is essential to your mental health as well, right? Like, is that your experience?
Like 1,000%. That's how I got to this level in the first place. Sport and practice became an escape in the beginning. When school was going crazy, I go to practice, I could leave everything at the door. When home life was crazy, I could go to practice, I could leave everything at the door. Confidence, when that is low, those types of things. So it provided a safe space for a while. But when you go from doing it for the love of it to doing it to provide for school, and then doing it to provide a living and a lifestyle, then that's where you see that transition of practicing your sport can go from being essential to also being essential but also detrimental to your mental health.
I also feel like I kind of bought into the narrative of like, I am so privileged getting to live my life and skate around in a circle and see the world, and my school's paid for and I'm sponsored by Lululemon. You know what I mean? Like, I felt like I didn't have the right to feel the way I was feeling. And that kept me in like the depression closet for far too long as well.
That was the harshest reality, I feel like, once you actually, like that part, like you're like, I am privileged. Like, what do I have to complain about?
Yeah.
The same things that if you were to tell someone, like a coach or someone else, that, hey, I'm dealing with this, those are the things that they would give you back to be like, you don't have a reason to be.
Right. And the fans, too. I feel like that's our expectation as the general public, is that what do you have to complain about? You're living your dream when the rest of us are like working in cubicles.
Honestly, as I'm listening to you talk, I can understand to a certain extent, you know, maybe the public saying, oh, like, what do you have to complain about? But like, we can have compassion for all kinds of people. And I think, honestly, the most important thing that you can have is also compassion for yourself. But clearly that's lacking.
I think it's lacking because that's the culture of sport. It's about being tough. It's about being, you know, a superhero. It's, you know, there's this macho mentality.
I feel like we need to do a better job of compartmentalizing some of those qualities, because certain things that make you superb as an elite level athlete can also, over time, if you breed it into your regular everyday life, it's gonna hurt you and harm you. If you're constantly trying to be tough on the track or constantly not trying to show emotions.
Perfectionism.
But is that, everything you just described, is that actually necessary in order for you to be good at your sport? Like, what if there was some kind of, you know, revolution in the way that we think? Because, like, I understand, right? Like, I've certainly never been an athlete at your level, but I remember being in high school, basketball player, flag football player, going like, oh, when I am angry, I play better. I used to say this to myself, so I would make myself angry on the court. And I'm wondering if maybe this idea that hiding your pain and that sort of aggression, if all that stuff, if we're actually all super wrong about that.
If you think about football, if you sit there and you start crying, like, it's over with. Because, I mean, I remember in a competition, like,
I tried.
conference championships, I remember watching it, and it was an event that I wasn't even that good at. But this girl, she started crying, and I was like, oh, baby, I said, oh, it's about to go down. And it did.
You know what? I
And
would
it
have had the
did.
same reaction. I'd have been like, yeah, you crying.
Yeah,
You crying.
I would have been like, it's over. But anger is so unsustainable as an emotion.
It really is.
Right? Like,
And
and,
it
that
eats
does
at
not,
you.
it's poison. Yeah. Like, you think it's gonna, like, it's like you have a bad breakup and you're so angry at an ex. Like, that's not, it's only hurting you.
Yeah. All right. We'll be right back. In 2019, both the NFL and the NBA required every team to employ a mental health professional. Frankly, I can't believe it took that long. Was this because athletes pushed for it?
I definitely think it's because athletes push for it, because it's like what we were saying earlier, that you're the person who knows you have a problem. And I think genuinely a lot of leagues and teams were just kind of oblivious to the fact that, you know, elite athletes in the biggest competitions still needed that basic level of care.
You had a question earlier.
When you folks came out, how did that affect your performance? Because I mean, my, like, crystal clear, it was like nirvana almost for me.
I've been out since 5th grade.
Wow. Good for
Yeah,
you.
so going into sport, for me, sport just became more of a way for me to express myself, like in any way possible. yeah, I'm letting you know I'm gay. I don't, like, that flag was gonna fly
Yeah.
every time.
I was training in an environment I started with the Australian Institute of Sport from at the age of 11 in a development program, which is way too young to be telling anybody about my sexuality. That caused a lot of problems for me, feeling very alienated and isolated within the training environment until it got to the point where I actually retired when I was 18 because it just, I just couldn't. I got super comfortable with myself and my sexual identity, and then I got an opportunity to come back into diving 15 months before the Beijing Olympic Games. And the coach actively created this inclusive environment for me. And I was happy diving for the first time in years. And that was the catalyst for change for me. I went from retired, absolutely nothing, not treating my body like a temple, to an Olympic champion in 15 months.
I'm assuming that a lot of the people who are watching this who are queer are totally going to relate to what you just said. But for the straight people, can you break that down just a little bit more? Because I think some people might go, well, what does that have to do with your sport?
It's kind of like being in the closet for a normal person. Like, you're having to watch everything that you're saying and then thinking about, over-focusing on what other people are thinking about you, whether they're thinking that you're gay, and that anxiety that comes with all of that, and what are the consequences going to be if, somebody does find out that I'm gay or whatever. I'm just exhausted talking about it.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like what you're telling me is that you're trying to embody this straight character 24/7. And that's a huge distraction when you're trying to perform at such a high level.
Yeah.
And you're right. Lots of people experience this, not just athletes.
As an athlete, you feel like the consequences are greater than if you weren't an athlete. I definitely told myself that story, that it would be easier, outside of sport. Sports feel very conservative.
They are conservative.
Yeah.
Look at Michael
Oh
Sam.
my gosh. Yeah.
Yeah.
The consequences feel huge because it is you are on a very public stage, so you don't know how the fans are going to react. It is your job, so you don't know if you're going to lose your job, as well as the endorsement. So that's how you support yourself. So it feels like your entire life. It definitely feels really high stakes in sport.
What we're talking about here is other people making decisions who are homophobic and maybe not picking you, right? Is that what we're actually talking about?
It's a fear.
It's definitely a factor, right? Because just like some coaches aren't understanding about mental health, they're also not understanding about queerness. And I feel like this starts at the lowest levels of sport, at the youth level, right? We see this today all the time with trans kids, for example, being told they can't compete in their sports, and adults, like state legislators, attacking them. And I feel like from the beginning, we're just telling queer kids they don't belong in sports. And coaches, even at elite levels, not all of them certainly, but some of them have these ideas that that's true.
Have any of you ever been on a team where there was a mental health specialist?
Yes, there was oftentimes, someone around, but I chose not to access it.
Why did you choose not to access that kind of resource?
Firstly, initially, it was shame. As a teenager, it was, macho sporting mentality. I didn't want to be seen as weak. And those, that psychologist was employed by the people who are making the decisions. I did eventually seek, sort of help for my my depression and anxiety, which got really bad after the Beijing Olympics. I became a drug addict. I didn't want anybody to know, so I did it all secretly.
I think what's important is having the option to do either, right? Some people might feel more comfortable going to a team professional because there are privacy concerns for real, and I don't want to downplay those. But also, if a team has picked out somebody, then you can trust that they know what they're doing with regard to sports and not just with regard to mental health in the general population, because athletes have these specific concerns. But at the same time, if you want to go outside, like many athletes do, you should have that as a resource where you don't have to foot the bill.
Yeah. Does Canada provide anything like that to athletes?
A little bit, yeah. I am very proud of the changes in the Canadian system, and I think they are creating more of a holistic, healthy culture. But still, our funding mechanism is how many Olympic medals can you win?
Right.
So if an entire sports budget for 4 years is dependent upon the results from the previous Olympics, that's a pretty stressful ask, you know?
Raven, I'm curious what you were saying before about kind of the differences between the resources you had in 2016 versus 2020 or 2021. What was that difference like?
It was just all around, really just the small things. Because already for me, at that point, I had already started taking my mental health a lot more serious between the two Olympics. So there were just more things that I was aware of. Like I said, the amount of like doctors that we had for our mental, the amount of conversations that we were having for that, the amount of support. For instance, 2 days after I competed, I lost my mom.
Right.
I'm in Tokyo. The amount, I had like 2 different calls from 2 different doctors. By the time I'm breaking down at hearing the news, I have 2 to 3 of them with me. And then just the amount of support that surrounded each and every one of us as things were going on, you can just feel the shift and feel like, okay, like we know we're here for medals, but we also know that we have a young team. So everyone was just being and feeling supported from a mental aspect, asking how are you?
Yeah.
A lot more of those things.
Just such a simple question.
Yeah,
Right.
like
But what you're saying is that actually represents a shift.
it matters. And feeling like you can actually be honest in those moments and that you have the free space to be honest in those moments was like another big shift.
Yeah.
So that helped a lot.
Next, NFL veteran Ryan O'Callaghan reveals what it took for him to say the words, "I'm gay," out loud. My guest is Ryan O'Callaghan, a former NFL player for the New England Patriots and the Kansas City Chiefs. His book, My Life on the Line, How the NFL Damn Near Killed Me and Ended Up Saving My Life, hits at the heart of what we're talking about today: LGBTQ athletes and mental health. Hi, how you doing?
I'm doing great.
I want to talk to you about when you came out publicly. In 2017, you make the decision to come out to everyone. What was going through your head as you were waiting for that article to come out?
Well, the reason I waited so long was, you don't spend 30 years hating your life to being totally fine overnight. And I felt like I needed to have some ground to stand on if I were to come out publicly. And so when I made the decision to do it, I reached out to an LGBTQ sports publication and spoke with the editor and came up with a plan. He told me what to anticipate, and he wasn't wrong. As soon as the article hit, it was picked up by basically every news organization there was. Because the whole point of me coming out was be an example for someone or try to help someone who could relate to the position I was in. And I got an outpouring of messages and support and requests to talk about, my journey more.
It is actually refreshing in reading your book to hear you say things like, I never really loved football. I very rarely hear elite athletes say something like that, even though you kind of suspect it sometimes, right? You're there for various reasons. Sometimes it's a way to get out. Sometimes it's a way to hide that you're gay. Do you regret having become a football player?
I say yes. I do regret it, but I wouldn't change anything at the same time. I know that's kind of a little complicated. I only say that because the position I'm in now is great. If I go back and change these things, who knows where I would be today. It took a lot of work, growth to get where I am now, especially compared to who I was, before I was openly gay. But no, I wouldn't go back and change anything just because I love where I'm at now.
I mean, that's huge. I'm happy to hear that.
Yeah, it's taken a lot of work. I went to a therapist for years. Even to this day, I'll talk to one. It's just healthy. It really is just healthy to talk to someone.
Being in the closet for years in the NFL and prior to that, obviously, took a pretty significant mental health toll on you. Can you tell me about that?
It was absolutely exhausting. In high school, it was a good excuse not to have a girlfriend. I'm trying to get to college, once you get to college, that excuse doesn't work so much because now you're living on your own. You're, one of the best players at the college, and you've got all these girls around. And so really it just starts to weigh heavier and heavier. And for me, it all just stacked on top of one another to become this weight that I thought I could never get off my back.
So you're carrying this weight, you're making up fake long-distance girlfriends, you are, right, I mean, very typical things, frankly.
Yeah.
But it adds up. What does that do to you? Where do you end up?
I end up a drug addict, absolutely miserable, suicidal. And if it wasn't for the help from David Price, the trainer at the Chiefs at the time, I would not be here today.
Yeah.
It took someone recognizing me spiraling out of control and tactfully suggesting I talk to someone. It took that to save my life. Even though he didn't know what the underlying issue was, if it wasn't for that intervention from him, I would not be here.
Yeah. And when you say talk to someone, you mean a therapist, right?
Yeah, love Dr. Wilson. Still talk to her today. First time I went in to meet Dr. Wilson, I was very resistant. I met my match with her. She was pretty much the complete opposite. Short, from the inner city. She wouldn't let me get away with my typical BS of skating around issues and trying to get my way. And it took months of meeting with her, just building the rapport with her and the trust. I finally, for the first time in my life, said the words, "I'm gay."
The first time that happened ever out loud was in her office.
Yeah, it was in her office. And she stood up, came around, gave me a hug, and told me I wasn't the first player to sit there and tell her that.
Wow.
Which just felt amazing. To not feel alone goes a long way. And I never thought I was the only closeted player. I can look, at that time, I'd see other guys in the locker room, see kind of their habits, their patterns, and I'd be like, oh, they're closeted. I'm gonna stay away from them so they don't figure me out.
It's so isolating.
Yeah. But yeah, Dr. Wilson, telling her saved my life.
Right now, there is only one out NFL player, Carl Nassib. Why is that?
I think only one has found what it takes within to raise their hand and go, this is me. And in a lot of closet people's eyes, by doing that, you feel like you're potentially sacrificing your career, friendships, family. And those things, your career, friendship, family, is what keeps people in the closet. But I think Carl coming out and doing it successfully is a great example to all the other closeted guys.
You are in touch with some of them, right?
Yeah. It feels good just to be able to tell someone, even, especially they know you're not going to out them. I think a lot of guys just say, my career is only going to be X amount of time. I'll just do it when I retire. And they don't stop to think about what a huge impact they could have by coming out while they're still playing.
Or how much happier they could be.
Or how much happier they can be. It's hard to explain to someone just how much better off you are.
Yeah. If you could go back right now in time and just talk to your younger self, what would you say to that younger Ryan?
First would be take a deep breath and relax. Like, it's all gonna be okay. I can't stress enough how just consumed I was just about being gay. I think anyone who has the weight of hiding who you are to the core, you're born gay or bi or trans, the weight of not having that on you, the freedom I feel now is hard to put into words. And when I talk to people, whether it's someone in business or sport, I think the same applies. If you can actually be yourself, you don't have to worry about all that other stuff.
Ryan, I really, really appreciate this conversation. Thank you so much for being so open with me, for taking the time. This means a lot.
Absolutely. I'm happy to do it.
So some of us might have seen Ted Lasso, which focuses a whole season on a sports psychologist who helped Ted and the team. Julie, what kind of impact do you think those kinds of depictions can have for athletes?
I think it's huge because you have real life athletes, these wonderful people here coming forward, but that doesn't necessarily reach everybody. So to have it in such a prominent pop culture space with one of an Emmy award-winning TV show, I think that's huge. And I think it makes people think about it in a different light, especially because with that show in particular, people are also taking away lessons like kindness and basic stuff like that. So I think just adding another one onto that pile of what people can take away from that show, I think is really huge, especially for people who might not know elite athletes in their daily life, or people who maybe don't even watch sports. Like a lot of non-sports fans watch Ted Lasso. So I think it just broadens the conversation.
Sometimes the depictions that I see of especially Olympic athletes, it feels like you're seeing robots on screen with maybe a personal trauma from your past to like show how far you've come.
That goes
right?
back to like what the role the media plays with like you have networks like laser focused on like Bodie Miller and his grief or something like that, instead of, you know, we are happy to have athletes show emotion when it serves our storytelling purposes.
Exactly.
I came out before the Beijing Olympics, and my coming out was front page news of the biggest newspaper in Australia, and I loved it.
Okay. Sometimes it works, sometimes it's nice. Sure.
It was like the most extra coming out ever. I loved it. I didn't expect to. The journalist was just, profiling me. And, when it came to the question, who do you live with? I just blurted, because I'd gotten so comfortable. Like, this coach had created such an inclusive environment, and I'd gotten so comfortable with my identity. I just blurted out, I live with my boyfriend, without even, she was the one who was gobsmacked. She actually asked me whether or not I wanted that to go into the story. And I talked to people about it, whether or not I should do it. Some people were against it, like it's going to affect my sponsorships. It will overshadow any achievement that I do have. So I will be forever known as the gay diver. Luckily, there have been other gay divers since, so I'm not the gay diver. But I don't mind that, because I see it as an asset rather than, defining me. I see it as a wonderful, colourful, a fabulous part of my identity, but it's always associated in there.
I came out prior to Sochi in opposition of Russia's anti-LGBTQ laws. That's what I'm most proud of as well. And it was the front page of every large newspaper in Canada. I didn't quite have the reaction that you did, but I mean, the thousands of letters, that were written in support really touched my heart. I didn't realize it was going to be as big of a deal as it was. I was the only athlete from North America to come out publicly, so there was a lot of media pressure. And it was a bit tough, because I felt like I was in a tug of war. Like, on one hand, I don't know if I did enough for the queer community, being on the world's largest stage as one of the only voices to say, hey, this is wrong. But then on another side, I mean, you kind of touched upon it, where the athletic community was kind of like, okay, great, but why do you have to talk about this? Like, shut up and speed skate. So I just felt like I couldn't do the right thing for either group, and it was quite stressful, to be honest.
So you were just feeling like you're failing on either side?
A little bit. I mean, when I got to the line and I knew that I was in Sochi, Russia, fully myself, and I loved myself, and I was so proud of the journey, and the journey was hard. Like, it was a really bumpy road to get to Sochi, unfortunately, with my mental health. Knowing that I was there fully as myself, I just thought, I could fall and I would still feel like this was a success, because I wouldn't change anything, but it was not an easy journey, no.
Yeah.
See, I will say you did, because as a gay athlete, coming up in sport at that time and seeing how things were for people in the community, knowing that you were out there in Russia, of all places, I'm like, yo, you know who they got over there? Like, that you were able, that you were able to stand confidently and go out there, that necessarily just the representation and you being open enough to just stand in yourself completely and as a whole definitely paved the way for people like me, that I was like, okay, once I get there, I'm gonna add a little bit more sugar in that tank, So
You're gonna make me cry. You are making me cry.
I want to personally thank you for that, because now that torch for me is like, all right, how can I try to hand that off to the next athletes coming up? That the negative side of what happened to you doesn't have to happen again.
Thank you.
When we come back, we're visiting with former college tennis player Nick Lee as he uses tennis to help young athletes improve their mental health. Welcome back. We had the opportunity to spend the day with Nick Lee, a gay former college tennis player who's been taking the lessons that he learned from his own mental health struggles to help the next generation of young tennis players. Take a look.
The times where I've, felt the most like I need to work on my mental health is definitely when I feel like there's two of me and they're kind of like battling against each other rather than fighting against my opponent. And I guess that, I don't know, I just have to, work with myself.
I think mental health can be positive and negative, like suicide prevention. It's just like how you view life or how you view your emotions.
So we are in Corona Park, right next to the National Tennis Center.
And friends and supporters of the players. So welcome everybody to the Matt Stevenson Junior Tennis Tournament. What I think makes this tournament special is that we talk about mental health. There is a connection between mental health and mental performance on the tennis court. So we have added a sports psychology table, and I want to acknowledge Nick Lee and Rachel Van.
My name's Nicholas Lee. You can call me Nick. I'm studying counseling psychology with a specialization in sports psychology. I love tennis for many reasons. Just the little things, like the sound of like the tennis ball coming off the racket, hitting with like top spin, just having like a long rally with someone. It's almost like a dance. You're communicating through hitting a tennis ball. I started playing tennis when I was 6 years old. I played varsity collegiate tennis at Vassar College. There were definitely times in which tennis negatively impacted my mental health. Beginning of like junior year of high school, I was having like very debilitating anxiety. Living like that definitely contributed to depression and feelings of hopelessness. And so I didn't know how to communicate any of that. So I ended up turning to self-harm. And on top of that, I was struggling with my sexuality. There are no out men in professional tennis. If I wasn't seeing that, then how could I even imagine that it was there?
Can you be beautiful?
And this is just like a sports psychology workbook for junior tennis players that I put together. It's a reflection exercise, like really focusing on like what you did well, because it's really easy to get caught up in like what we didn't do well. We're looking at the intersection of like mental health and then LGBT plus identities, which is also part of like what we're doing right here. Like I'm openly gay.
Oh.
When I was 11, I was already experiencing like some anxiety. It manifested more in team sports for me, particularly baseball. Homophobia was rampant in baseball. We were doing this drill. It was just like tossing the baseball. The coach just goes, I want you to all flap your wrists like a faggot. And so I remember like a bunch of people on the team just like laughing, and I definitely internalized that line and many other lines that I heard in that environment and other sporting environments. Just due to my own struggles with mental health and that journey for me within and outside of sports, I just thought that being in a program that actually emphasizes the importance of mental health was something that mattered a lot to me. I do think mental health is the next frontier, and we're seeing it with the professional tennis players such as Naomi Osaka, who's been very outspoken about prioritizing her mental health. The mission of the tournament is to promote the importance of mental health through a competitive junior tennis tournament. And it's named after Matt Stevenson, who was a tennis player and coach. He's someone that struggled with his mental health a lot, and he spoke about it very, very openly. Unfortunately, he died by suicide in 2017.
My son, Matt, was a very keen tennis player and also a tennis coach and tennis teacher. And he would really love the way that this tournament is organized and the focus on mental health and mental performance on the tennis court.
These are research from the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention.
Okay, let me hear the score.
Lucia won.
Okay.
Tennis does stress me out. It doesn't even have to be in a match. It could just be in practice if you're not doing well, or if the one thing you're supposed to be focusing on that your coach is telling you and it just doesn't go well, you're just like, wow, why isn't it going well?
Right. I was always thinking, I can play so much better. I can beat this person. I'm not proud of this, but I used to cry on the court. I used to scream, and that would really, really bring my level down.
One of the negative things that can happen in these competitive environments is you never feel good enough. It's like there's always that next step, but you can also be happy with where you're at.
Stress has always been a little bit hard for me, and I think that's partially why I used to have a bad attitude. One thing that really, really helped me, there's this band called the Monkees. They have this one song called Daydream Believer, and I've been listening to it before every single match, and it's just calmed me down. It's made me less stressed. It's just made me realize the good things in life. I spent a lot of my life without a sports psychologist, and then I got one. He gave me routines, he gave me coping skills, and that was just the basis for me to become someone with a good attitude.
I think sports need to fundamentally change, period, for all people to be mentally healthy. Just continuing with the grassroots efforts to promote inclusion at all levels of sport so that people have the opportunity to rise up in the ranks in a space where they feel comfortable being themselves. We want people to enjoy this experience, regardless of their ability as an athlete, regardless of their sexual orientation, gender identity. This is an environment meant for everyone to enjoy, and this is what we want youth to get out of it.
The stress isn't gonna help me get anywhere, so, what else can I focus on that will, help me out?
My favorite thing about tennis is how happy it makes me to just hit a tennis ball, win a match. It just gives me a good satisfaction.
Thank you to everyone on the panel. I really, really enjoyed this conversation. I have one more question for you. Outside of therapy, what do you all do to take care of yourselves, in terms of your mental health? And if you say work out, I'm gonna bang my head against the wall.
I'm not gonna say
I
that.
twerk out.
I
I twerk out. So that's one of the things, they say the hip, it releases a lot of stress and tension. So
All right,
yeah.
sure.
Meditation.
Sure. We've all seen you dance, so.
Yeah.
But meditation? For real?
Meditation, also, I like to write my goals, my dreams down. Even if it's not a vision board, even just posting sticky notes on my bathroom mirror of things that I would like to accomplish, because I feel especially in the mirror, you sometimes go in and you see yourself. So I write down the things that I want to see in myself when I go into a bathroom, especially when I'm down bad or I'm going to a space where I may be entering a depression. I force myself to sit in that mirror for about 30 minutes and repeat those positive words 3 times each, and I may circle back around that wall about 3 times.
That's an amazing idea. I have never done that, and I should. I really try and focus on what I have control over, because I think I get a little anxious when I'm just blowing with the wind. If I don't have a good night's sleep, I'm genuinely useless.
Yeah.
So do as I say, not what I do, because I do enjoy eating chicken wings, but diet, sleep.
Nothing wrong with chicken wings, by the way.
No, I know, I'm a big fan. I grew up in a very Roman Catholic household, and it's difficult to have faith. I struggle with my faith a little bit, but I need to take time to connect spiritually. Very much even just meditation, right? And then, therapy. And I lean on my partner as well, my fiance.
How about you?
I'm still a part of 12-step communities, so I'm 7 years clean and sober now.
Fantastic.
Thank you.
Congrats.
So that's a great source. So connection is one of the best ways to combat depression, anxiety, is actually connecting with people. So that serves that purpose. It also makes you quite, introspective. But on a practical day-to-day basis, I think the thing that was I found so helpful earlier in my recovery was doing gratitude lists. Writing literally 3 things that I was grateful for in the first thing in the morning, because I have anxiety about falling back into depression. But when you do a gratitude list, it it just changes the way you think about the world. So you're not looking at the world as if something goes wrong, it's the world's conspiring against me. I do have a tendency for that. So it stops that from happening. But then even if shit was to hit the fan and I did ever, become depressed again, that big blackness wouldn't seem so scary, because I won't have just blackness. I'll have at least 3 things that I have thought of just that morning that I'll have there in that blackness with me, which makes it seem a lot less scary.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing that. Yeah, to all of you. Thank you to everyone who joined us. We'll see you next time.